She had 1 hour to live, and she didn't know it. April 14th, 2009, a hotel room in Boston. The kind of room that looks the same in every city. Beige walls, a made bed, the hum of an air conditioner. A young woman named Julissa Brisman walked through that door believing she was there for a simple, professional appointment. Nothing more. She would never walk out. Minutes later, a hotel employee would hear something no one wants to hear through a wall. A struggle. A cry. Then silence. When police arrived, they found Julissa collapsed in the hallway, shot 3 times at close range. She was rushed to the hospital, but the damage was already done. She died that night, and with her death, a city of over 500,000 people suddenly had a killer walking among them. One who had found his victim not in a dark alley, not through months of stalking, but through a website millions of people used every single day. Craigslist. This wasn't supposed to happen here. Not in a hotel with cameras, not in a city with one of the best police forces in the country, and certainly not to a young woman who had simply answered an online ad for a massage appointment. But this was only the beginning, because as investigators would soon discover, this wasn't an isolated attack. It was part of a pattern, a hunting method. Someone had been using Craigslist, the same platform used for selling old furniture and finding apartments, to find women alone in hotel rooms, with no one around to help them. And the man behind it all wasn't some drifter with a criminal record. He wasn't someone who fit the profile investigators expected. He was a 23-year-old medical student at one of the most prestigious universities in the country. He had a fiancée, a wedding just weeks away, friends who described him as brilliant, charming, destined for a career saving lives, not taking them. His name was Philip Markoff. And for a brief, terrifying window in the spring of 2009, he would become known across America by a different name entirely, the Craigslist Killer. To understand how a future doctor became a predator, you have to understand the setup he used. It was chillingly simple. He would browse the erotic services section of Craigslist, a section that, at the time, functioned as an unregulated marketplace for adult services. He'd find women advertising massage or companionship services, usually independent, usually working alone in hotel rooms across Massachusetts, Rhode Island, and New York. He'd respond to their ads using anonymous email accounts, arrange a meeting time, and then show up armed, not always to kill. Sometimes, investigators would later learn, simply to rob. But every time, the plan carried the same terrifying potential for violence. Julissa Brisman wasn't his first victim. Weeks earlier, on April 1st, a masseuse in Boston had answered a similar ad. A man arrived at her hotel room and within moments produced a gun, bound her hands with plastic ties, and robbed her before fleeing. She survived, terrified but alive. Then, just days before Julissa's murder, another woman in a different Boston area hotel faced an almost identical scenario. Same method, same terrifying calm from her attacker.
If the map is right,
she too survived. Investigators would later connect all 3 attacks, 2 robberies and 1 murder, through a common thread, the same online platform, similar victim profiles, and, crucially, physical evidence that would tie them together in ways the killer never anticipated. Because whoever this man was, he had made a mistake. At the scene of Julissa Brisman's murder, investigators recovered something critical, something that, in the coming days, would begin to unravel the entire case. But at that moment, in mid-April 2009, all Boston knew was this: a killer was targeting women through Craigslist, and no one, not the police, not the public, not the news outlets scrambling to cover the story, had any idea that the man responsible was already hiding in plain sight, living a double life so convincing, so complete, that even the people closest to him would later say the same haunting thing. They never saw it coming. In the days following Julissa Brisman's murder, Boston police launched one of the most intense manhunts the city had seen in years. Detectives, forensic teams, and FBI cyber specialists all converged on a single goal: find the man behind the ad. The first breakthrough came from something surprisingly old-fashioned: paper. At the crime scene, investigators recovered a piece of a magazine wrapper. It seemed insignificant at first, just packaging debris, but forensic analysts traced it back to a specific subscription label. That label led to a name. And that name led investigators to a Krav Maga self-defense magazine subscribed to by a young man attending medical school in Boston. Philip Markoff. At the same time, cybercrime investigators were working a second angle entirely, tracing the anonymous email account used to respond to Julissa's Craigslist ad. Emails don't just vanish. They leave digital fingerprints, IP addresses, login timestamps, server records, and when investigators pulled those records, the trail led to a wireless internet connection registered to an apartment in Quincy, Massachusetts. This same apartment Philip Markoff shared with his fiancée. Two completely independent lines of evidence, one physical, one digital, were now pointing to the exact same man. On the surface, Philip Markoff seemed like the least likely suspect imaginable. He was a second-year student at Boston University School of Medicine. Colleagues described him as intelligent, personable, even easygoing. He volunteered. He tutored. He was engaged to his college sweetheart, a young woman named Megan McAllister, with a wedding scheduled for late August 2009, just months away. Friends would later say he seemed normal, ambitious, kind even, the kind of guy you'd trust with your life on an operating table one day. But behind that image, investigators were building a very different picture. When police finally moved to arrest Markoff, they did so with calculated precision. On April 20th, 2009, just days after Julissa's murder, officers stopped him and his fiancée on Interstate 95 as they were about to board a cruise ship, a pre-wedding vacation, according to those close to them. Some investigators later suggested the timing raised troubling questions. Was he simply on vacation? Or was he attempting to disappear? Inside the vehicle, and later in a search of his apartment, police allegedly found a disturbing collection of evidence. A firearm forensically linked to the crimes, ammunition, handcuffs, duct tape, and most damning of all, prosecutors would later claim a hollowed-out book filled with cash. Some of it later linked to the earlier robberies. It was the kind of discovery that reads like something out of a crime thriller, except this was real. Prosecutors argued that every item told the same story, that this wasn't a moment of impulse, but a man prepared, again and again, to walk into a room armed and ready for violence. As the investigation deepened, so did the mystery of who Philip Markoff actually was. Classmates were stunned. Professors were stunned. Even his own fiancée reportedly had no idea about the secret life he had allegedly been living. This was a man on track to become a doctor, someone trained day after day to help people, to heal them, allegedly living a completely separate existence in the shadows of an anonymous website. It raised the question that would follow this case for years to come. How does someone build two lives so completely separate, so perfectly hidden, that not even the people who loved him most could see the seams? Investigators soon connected Markoff not just to Julissa Brisman's murder, but to the two earlier robberies as well, the ones in the days before her death. The pattern, investigators said, was undeniable. The method, they argued, was identical. Respond to an ad, arrange a meeting, arrive armed, control the situation through fear. But why? That question, the psychological why behind the mask, would become the center of a media storm unlike anything Boston had seen in years. Reporters descended. Cable news ran wall-to-wall coverage. And across the country, people asked the same unsettling question. If a future doctor, engaged, educated, seemingly ordinary, could be hiding something like this, who else might be hiding something too? Philip Markoff was charged with murder, armed robbery, and kidnapping. He pleaded not guilty. and as he sat in a Massachusetts jail awaiting trial, the case that had gripped the nation was only just beginning to reveal its darkest chapters. Because the story of Philip Markoff wasn't going to end in a courtroom. It was going to end somewhere far more disturbing. While Philip Markoff sat in the Nashua Street jail awaiting trial, the case outside those walls was evolving into something far bigger than a single murder investigation. It was becoming a cultural flashpoint. Craigslist, the website at the center of it all, came under intense scrutiny. Lawmakers, advocacy groups, and even several state attorneys general began pushing the platform to shut down its erotic services section entirely. The argument was simple. If a site could be used this easily to locate and target vulnerable women, then it carried a responsibility to act. Under mounting pressure, Craigslist made a decision that would reshape the platform permanently. In May 2009, just weeks after Julissa Brisman's murder, the company removed the erotic services category altogether, replacing it with a more heavily monitored adult services section that would later be phased out entirely. The case had done more than end a life. It had changed the internet. Meanwhile, behind bars, Philip Markoff's carefully constructed image continued to unravel. Court documents revealed a man leading a life of striking contradictions. By day, a promising medical student. By night, prosecutors alleged a man who had developed a secret gambling addiction, reportedly losing significant amounts of money online, and, investigators believed, turning to armed robbery as a way to fund it. If true, it painted a chilling picture. Not a calculated criminal mastermind, but a man spiraling, hiding desperation behind a mask of composure, escalating from theft to an act of irreversible violence. His defense team, meanwhile, began exploring an entirely different narrative. They suggested Markoff may have been suffering from an undiagnosed mental health condition, possibly linked to a bipolar disorder that ran in his family. They pointed to a family history marked by tragedy, hoping to build a case that his actions were the product of a mind breaking down, not a man choosing evil. The prosecution rejected that framing entirely. To them, the planning was too meticulous. The weapon, the restraints, the anonymous email accounts, the careful selection of victims who were alone and vulnerable. This wasn't a psychotic break, they argued. It was a pattern, a method. As pretrial hearings dragged into 2010, the country watched and waited. The wedding that was supposed to happen in August 2009 never took place. Megan McAllister, the fiancée who had stood by him publicly in the earliest days after his arrest, eventually severed all ties. Reports at the time described her as devastated, blindsided by a betrayal that went far beyond infidelity. She had been engaged to marry a man she believed she knew completely. She wasn't alone in that feeling. Family members, friends, professors, all of them would later describe the same disorienting experience. The sense that the person they knew and the person described in the courtroom simply could not be the same man. Inside jail, Markoff was reportedly placed under close observation. Officials were aware of the psychological toll the case was taking on him, the collapse of his engagement, the destruction of his reputation, the certainty of a trial that could end with a life sentence. Every article about him now used the same haunting label, the Craigslist Killer. The identity he had spent 23 years building had been replaced entirely by the crime he was accused of. Then, on August 15, 2010, just weeks before his trial was set to begin, everything changed again. Philip Markoff was found unresponsive in his jail cell. He had taken his own life. He left behind letters. One, reportedly addressed to his former fiancée, seemed to express a desire to be with her, even in death. A statement that only deepened the unease surrounding his psychological state. With his death, the criminal case against Philip Markoff was formally closed. He would never stand trial. Never be forced to answer, under oath, for what he had done. Never explain, in his own words, how a future doctor became one of the most infamous alleged killers in the country. For Julissa Brisman's family, for the two surviving victims who had faced him and lived, his death brought no verdict, no conviction, No moment of legal justice. Only an ending that felt, to many, unfinished. In the years since Philip Markoff's death, the case has continued to raise questions that no courtroom ever got the chance to answer. How does a person build a second self so convincing that it survives daily scrutiny from professors, classmates, and the woman who is about to become his wife? Forensic psychologists who studied the case from a distance point to a pattern seen in other so-called successful predators. Individuals who compartmentalize so completely that their public and private selves operate almost independently of one another. To the people around Markoff, there was simply no seam to notice, no crack in the mask. Because, by all accounts, he never let one show. Some experts leaned toward the explanation his defense had prepared, an undiagnosed mental health crisis, possibly linked to family history, spiraling out of control under the weight of secret debt and shame. Others rejected that entirely, pointing to the calculation behind each attack, the anonymous accounts, the careful choice of victims who were alone and unlikely to have protection nearby, the weapon, the restraints, all prepared in advance. To them, this wasn't a mind in crisis. It was a plan, executed with unsettling composure. The truth is, we will likely never know for certain. The one person who could have explained it chose silence, permanently, rather than face a jury of his peers. What we do know is the impact this case left behind. Julissa Brisman was 25 years old. Those who knew her described an aspiring performer, a daughter, a woman with a future that was violently taken from her in a hotel room that should have simply been another appointment on another ordinary night. Her family was left not only to grieve her, but to grieve without ever hearing a courtroom formally declare what had happened to her, a verdict that never came. The two women who survived their encounters with Markoff carried their own invisible scars. They had looked into the eyes of a man capable of extreme violence and lived to tell investigators about it, an experience that, for many survivors, never fully leaves them, even decades later. And Craigslist itself was forever changed. The case became one of the earliest, most alarming examples of how the anonymity of the internet could be weaponized, how a platform built for convenience could just as easily become a hunting ground. In the years that followed, the conversation Markoff's crimes forced into the open, about online safety, about verifying identities, about the risks facing independent workers who met strangers alone, rippled far beyond Boston. It shaped policy discussions and safety practices that are still referenced today. Perhaps the most unsettling legacy of this case isn't the crime itself, but what it revealed about perception. Philip Markoff didn't fit any profile. He wasn't isolated. He wasn't struggling visibly. He was, by every outward measure, someone succeeding at life, someone people looked at and saw a future, not a threat.
This was a wonderful
And that,
idea. I'm so glad
more than the
you finally made
violence,
it here.
more than the headlines, may be the detail that lingers longest. Because it forces an uncomfortable question, not about strangers in dark alleys or the people we're taught to fear, but about the ones we already trust completely. The ones sitting across from us at dinner, sleeping beside us at night, or standing beside us on what's supposed to be the happiest day of their life. If someone that close can hide something that dark, how well do any of us really know the people around us? Philip Markoff took his final answers with him, but the questions he left behind about identity, about deception, about the thin, fragile line between the person we present and the person we truly are, remain as unsettling today as they were the night Julissa Brisman answered that ad. This has been the story of the Craigslist Killer.